When 29-year-old Rebecca Torres accepted the keys to her late aunt's crumbling Victorian mansion with nothing but a real estate agent's apology and a stack of overdue tax bills, she expected 3 weeks of dusty furniture and difficult decisions. But hidden behind a century-old fireplace lay a collection of documents that would expose a pharmaceutical empire's darkest secret and force an entire city to confront a tragedy it had spent 50 years trying to forget. For what Rebecca discovered in that sealed room had been deliberately hidden by people who believed some truths were too dangerous to survive. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if stories like this resonate with you, make sure you're subscribed. Tomorrow I've got something even more incredible to share with you. The late October rain hammered against the windows of the old Whitmore estate as Rebecca Torres stood in what the real estate agent cheerfully called the grand parlor. Grand was generous. Decaying was more accurate. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like grotesque flowers, the wallpaper peeled in long, sad strips, and the whole place smelled of mold, dust, and abandonment. Your Aunt Victoria was particular about the property, the agent said, choosing her words carefully. Margaret Sullivan had been selling real estate in Riverside Heights for 23 years, and in all that time, she'd never encountered anyone quite like Victoria Whitmore. She refused all renovation offers, all buyer inquiries. I had developers offering double the market value back in 2015 when the neighborhood was gentrifying. She turned down everyone. Honestly, Ms. Torres, I'm surprised she left it to anyone. We all assumed she'd let the city take it for back taxes. Rebecca hadn't even known she had an Aunt Victoria until the lawyer's letter arrived 2 weeks ago. The envelope had been forwarded 3 times before finally reaching her cramped studio apartment in Brookfield, 2 hours north of Riverside Heights. She'd been sitting on her second-hand couch, eating instant ramen and reviewing her dismal bank balance when she opened it. Dear Ms. Torres, I am writing to inform you that you have been named sole beneficiary in the estate of Victoria Marie Whitmore. The name had meant nothing to her. Rebecca's father, Daniel Torres, had died when she was 16. A sudden heart attack at 51, leaving Rebecca and her mother scrambling to survive on a substitute teacher's salary. In all those years growing up, through all the stories her father had shared about his childhood, his parents, his life before marriage, he had never once mentioned having a sister. When Rebecca pressed her mother about it, she'd gotten only tight-lipped silence and a warning: some family members are kept at a distance for good reasons, Becca. Your father made his choices. Let the dead rest. But the dead, it seemed, had other plans. Victoria Whitmore's estate consisted primarily of the mansion at 1847, Thornbridge Avenue, along with $247 in a checking account and a 1987 Honda Civic that hadn't run in a decade. The will, dated just 6 months before Victoria's death at age 93, contained only one personal message: to my niece Rebecca, I leave what I could not give your father, the truth he was too afraid to seek. May you have the courage he lacked. Now, at 29, drowning in $68,000 of medical school debt after dropping out in her final year, Rebecca was the reluctant owner of a 112-year-old mansion in Riverside Heights. On paper, the property was worth maybe $400,000, the lawyer had estimated. But the reality was far grimmer. The roof needed complete replacement. The plumbing was original to the house, which meant lead pipes throughout. The electrical system was a fire hazard. The foundation showed significant settling. Conservative estimates put necessary repairs at $200,000 to $250,000 before the place would even pass a basic home inspection. The property taxes alone were 3 years overdue, totaling $43,000 with penalties. The city had begun foreclosure proceedings twice, only to have them mysteriously withdrawn both times. Margaret Sullivan had mentioned that in passing, though she clearly didn't know why. The math was brutal and simple: liquidate everything, pay the debts, and walk away with maybe enough to cover 6 months of rent while she figured out what came next in her derailed life. Maybe she could finish that medical coding certification she'd started. Maybe she could move somewhere cheaper, start over completely. Anything to escape the weight of her failures. I'll give you privacy to look around, Margaret said, clearly eager to escape the depressing atmosphere. She pulled out a business card and pressed it into Rebecca's hand. "My cell number's on there. Call me when you're ready to discuss listing options. I know a few contractors who might be willing to do the basic repairs on contingency if they can flip it quickly." She paused at the front door, rain spattering through the opening. "And Ms. Torres? Be careful on the upper floors. Some of those boards are rotted through. I'd hate for you to get hurt." Alone in the silence, Rebecca walked through rooms frozen in time. The mansion was enormous, easily 6,000 square feet across 3 floors plus an attic. But Aunt Victoria had apparently lived like a hermit in just 2 rooms on the ground floor, a small bedroom and an even smaller kitchen, leaving the rest of the massive house untouched since, when? The furniture styles varied wildly, suggesting different eras of occupation. The dining room held a massive oak table that looked Edwardian, surrounded by chairs that were probably from the 1920s. The sitting room featured uncomfortable-looking Victorian settees. But other rooms held mid-century modern pieces, the kind that would fetch good money at vintage shops. And everywhere, layers upon layers of dust, as if time itself had settled like snow over everything. Family photographs lined the hallway in mismatched frames, faces Rebecca didn't recognize, moments from a history she'd never been told. She paused at each one, searching for any hint of her father in these strangers' features. One photo near the back of the hall caught her attention, a young woman, maybe 25, standing proudly in front of this very house when it was clearly new and magnificent. The gardens were manicured, the paint fresh, the windows gleaming. The woman wore a nurse's uniform, the style suggesting the early 1950s, her dark hair pulled back in victory rolls, her smile confident and full of purpose. Written on the back in faded fountain pen ink, Victoria Whitmore, RN, 1952. The work begins. What work? Rebecca wondered, studying her aunt's young face. This woman looked nothing like the reclusive hermit Margaret Sullivan had described. This Victoria looked ready to take on the world. Other photos showed Victoria at what appeared to be the same hospital, always in her nurse's uniform, sometimes with other medical staff, sometimes with patients. One showed her receiving some kind of award or certificate, a room full of people applauding. The date on the back, 1968. Another showed her at what looked like a protest or demonstration, holding a sign that was too small to read in the photograph. Date, 1974. And then the photos stopped. Nothing after 1974. As if Victoria Whitmore had simply ceased to exist in any documented way after that year, retreating into this mansion and becoming the recluse who would live here for another 48 years. The house had 8 fireplaces, Rebecca discovered as she continued her exploration. Most of them had been bricked up or sealed, probably for energy efficiency or safety. But a few remained open, their marble mantles the only remaining evidence of the mansion's former grandeur. The largest and most ornate was in what must have been the original library. Unlike most of the other rooms, which had been stripped of their contents over the years, this room still held floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, though most were empty except for dust and a few waterlogged paperbacks. The fireplace dominated the far wall, its marble mantel carved with elaborate Victorian flourishes, cherubs and grapevines and what looked like medical symbols, the rod of Asclepius, intertwined with the decorative elements. As the afternoon light faded and the rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, Rebecca found herself drawn to this room. Perhaps because it was one of the few spaces that still held traces of former grandeur, or perhaps because something about it felt important in a way she couldn't articulate. She was examining the bookshelves, pulling out the few remaining volumes to see if any were valuable, when her elbow accidentally struck the fire poker leaning against the hearth. It fell with a metallic clang that seemed far too loud in the empty house. And the sound echoed strangely. Rebecca froze, her hand still outstretched toward a bookshelf. The echo had come from inside the fireplace itself, but wrong somehow. Not the echo of sound traveling up a chimney, but something more contained. More deliberate. Kneeling on the filthy hearth, she peered up into the darkness of the chimney. The smell of old soot filled her nostrils, and she could see the brick walls ascending into shadows. But when she knocked on the back wall of the firebox, the sound was hollow. Wrong. This wasn't the solid brick that should have formed the back of a chimney. This was something else entirely. Her heart began to race with that universal human response to hidden things, that primitive excitement of discovery that had driven humans to explore every corner of their world. Rebecca pulled out her phone and activated the flashlight, playing the beam across the interior of the fireplace. In the harsh white light, she could see what she'd missed before. The mortar around certain bricks looked different. Newer. Or at least applied more recently than the surrounding construction. And there, barely visible in the lower right corner, were what looked like scratch marks in the soot, as if something had scraped against the brick repeatedly. Running her fingers along the interior bricks, Rebecca found what she was looking for, a gap, barely perceptible, running in a rectangle about 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. The opening would be just large enough for a person to squeeze through if they were determined. Her practical side warned her to stop. This was probably just an old coal chute or cleaning access, bricked up decades ago. She was trespassing on common sense, letting curiosity override caution in a house that was literally falling apart around her. But another part of her, the part that had driven her to medical school despite her family's limited means, the part that had always asked one more question, pushed one step further, couldn't let it go. Pushing against different sections of the brick, she felt something give. Not much, just a slight movement, but enough. Applying more pressure to the upper left corner, she heard a click, then a grinding sound of old mechanisms reluctantly engaging after decades of stillness. Slowly, fighting against rust and time, a section of the back wall shifted inward, revealing a darkness beyond that smelled of stale, trapped air and old paper. Rebecca sat back on her heels, her heart pounding. A secret room. An actual secret room hidden behind a fireplace in her dead aunt's mansion. The discovery felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. She pulled out her phone again, activated the flashlight, and aimed it into the void. The beam illuminated a small room, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, its walls lined with filing cabinets and shelves. A hidden space, deliberately concealed behind the fireplace, untouched for decades, judging by the undisturbed dust visible in the beam of light. Papers. Boxes and boxes of papers. Photographs pinned to corkboards. What looked like medical files organized in neat rows. And on a small table in the center of the tiny room, a portable typewriter from the 1970s, harvest gold in color, with a single sheet of paper still loaded in the carriage. Rebecca squeezed through the narrow opening, her jacket catching on rough brick edges. The air inside was dry, perfectly preserved, as if the room had been sealed airtight. As her eyes adjusted and she swept the phone's light around the space, she could see the meticulous organization. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. This wasn't a hiding place for valuables or a forgotten storage space. This was an archive. A secret library of what? The filing cabinets were labeled by year, 1971, 1972, 1973, 1974. The shelves held binders with titles like Hospital Records, Pediatric Wing, Autopsy Reports, Complete, Internal Memos, Clearwater Pharmaceutical, Meeting Minutes, Board of Health. One entire wall was covered with photographs, newspaper clippings, and what looked like hand-drawn charts and graphs showing trends and correlations. But it was the typewriter that drew Rebecca first, like a message specifically left for whoever would eventually find this place. She approached the small table, angling her phone to read the yellowed paper, the typing still clear despite the decades. To whoever finds this, and I pray someone eventually does, my name is Victoria Marie Whitmore. I am a registered nurse with 26 years of experience, and for 23 of those years I worked at Riverside General Hospital in the pediatric and maternity wards. What I discovered in 1973 made me a pariah in this city, cost me my career, destroyed my reputation, and forced me into a silence I have carried like a stone for 50 years. But I documented everything. Every case. Every suspicious death. Every cover-up. Every life destroyed by Clearwater Pharmaceutical's contaminated product, and every official who helped them bury the truth. The files in this room represent thousands of hours of investigation, documentation, and verification. They represent the voices of families who were told their loved ones' deaths were just tragic accidents, unfortunate coincidences, acts of God. They were none of those things. They were murder, plain and simple, committed through negligence and covered up through corruption. If you're reading this, you now have the evidence that could finally bring justice to the families who have suffered in silence for decades. Please, don't let them bury this again. Don't let fear or intimidation or money silence the truth the way it silenced me. The Clearwater family is powerful. They own this city in ways both visible and invisible. They will fight to keep this buried. They have already won once. Don't let them win forever. I am sorry I did not have the courage to do this myself. I hope you are braver than I was. Victoria M. Whitmore, December 14, 1998 inch. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking slightly as she held her phone. The date was significant, December 1998. 25 years ago. Her aunt had written this when Rebecca was just 4 years old, already planning for the day when someone would find this room and its contents. And now, that someone was her. Rebecca's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. Clearwater Pharmaceutical. Even she knew that name, despite being new to Riverside Heights. It was impossible not to. The Clearwater family name was on half the buildings downtown: Clearwater Medical Plaza, Clearwater Children's Wing at Riverside General Hospital, Clearwater Community Center. Clearwater Pharmaceutical was one of the largest employers in the city, their manufacturing facility on the east side employing over 2,000 people. The current CEO, she'd seen in a news article just last week, was Marcus Clearwater III, grandson of the company's founder. He'd been featured in Business Monthly as one of the state's most successful entrepreneurs, philanthropist of the year, a man dedicated to improving public health and supporting medical research. And her Aunt Victoria had apparently spent decades collecting evidence that his family's company had killed people and covered it up. Rebecca turned to the nearest filing cabinet, her medical training overriding her shock and fear with professional curiosity. She needed to understand what she was looking at. She pulled open the drawer labeled 1973 Patient Files AG. Manila folders, dozens of them, each labeled with a name, date, and case number. She pulled one at random, her hands leaving prints in the dust that coated everything. Patterson, Jennifer Marie. Age 7. Address, 4521, Maple Grove Road, Riverside Heights. Admitted, March 15, 1973. Initial symptoms, severe abdominal pain, vomiting, lethargy. Diagnosis, acute liver failure, origin unknown. Treatment, supportive care, attempted dialysis. Outcome, deceased, April 3, 1973. Autopsy report, attached, page 3. Notes, 5th pediatric case this month presenting with identical symptom progression. All families interviewed reported use of Clearwater's children's vitamin formula, specifically lot #4721B, purchased between January and February 1973. Product sample obtained and sent for independent analysis, results pending. Parents, David and Margaret Patterson. Father employed by Clearwater Pharmaceutical, Manufacturing Division. Rebecca's medical training, incomplete as it was, immediately recognized what she was seeing. This wasn't just one tragic case. This was a pattern. A cluster of similar cases presenting in a short time frame with identical symptoms, all connected by a common factor. Any epidemiologist would have flagged this immediately as requiring investigation. She grabbed another folder, then another, spreading them across the small table. The picture emerging was horrifying. Chen, Michael. Age 5. Liver failure. Deceased. Clearwater Vitamins, same lot number. Rodriguez, Sophia. Age 9. Liver failure. Survived with transplant. Clearwater Vitamins, same lot number. Williams, David Jr. Age 6. Liver failure. Deceased. Clearwater Vitamins, same lot number. Thompson, Ashley. Age 8. Liver failure. Deceased. Clearwater Vitamins, same lot number. On and on, case after case, each one carefully documented with hospital records. Autopsy reports were available, interviews with families, and Victoria's own nursing notes. The cases spanned from January 1973 through March 1974, with the highest concentration in the spring and summer of 1973. Rebecca counted quickly. 47 cases in this drawer alone. 47 children who had developed sudden, acute liver failure with no clear cause. 23 had died. 15 had survived with severe liver damage requiring transplants or ongoing treatment. 9 had recovered but with unknown long-term effects. And according to Victoria's meticulous documentation, every single family had purchased Clearwater's children's vitamin formula in the months before their child became ill. But there was more. Tucked into each file were additional documents, internal memos from Clearwater Pharmaceutical, obtained through means Victoria hadn't specified. She flipped through several, her horror growing with each page. Internal memo, February 1973, Quality Control has flagged unusual contaminant levels in lot #4721B, recommend immediate recall. James Peterson, QC Director. Response memo, February 1973, recall would cost approximately $2.3 million and create unnecessary public concern. Continue monitoring. No action required at this time. Marcus Clearwater Jr., CEO. Internal memo, March 1973, 7 reports of adverse reactions filed with company hotline, all related to lot #4721B, symptoms consistent with hepatotoxicity. Strong recommendation for immediate recall and investigation. Dr. Sarah Chen, Medical Director. Response memo, March 1973, Dr. Chen, your concerns are noted but considered excessive. These incidents represent less than 0.01% of units sold. All medications carry some risk. No recall authorized. M. Clearwater Jr. Internal memo, April 1973, Riverside General Hospital has reported cluster of pediatric liver failures. Investigating possible environmental cause. Hospital administrator requesting our cooperation in patient history review. Robert Shaw, Public Relations. Response memo, April 1973, cooperate minimally. Do not volunteer information about lot #4721B. If directly questioned, emphasize that our products undergo rigorous testing and meet all FDA requirements. Refer any persistent inquiries to Legal Department. M. Clearwater Jr. Rebecca sat on the dusty floor of the hidden room, surrounded by evidence of corporate negligence that had killed children. Her hands were shaking now, not just from the cold air seeping through the walls, but from rage and disbelief. They had known. Clearwater Pharmaceutical had known their product was contaminated, had known children were dying, and they had actively chosen to do nothing. Worse than nothing, they had actively worked to conceal the connection. She pulled open another filing cabinet drawer, this one labeled Cover-Up Official Documents. Inside were more memos, letters, meeting minutes, all carefully organized and annotated in Victoria's neat handwriting. Documents showing how Clearwater Pharmaceutical had pressured the local health department not to investigate the cluster of cases. Letters from the company's legal team threatening Riverside General Hospital with lawsuits if they publicly connected the deaths to Clearwater products. Meeting minutes from the city council showing how Clearwater, as the city's largest employer and taxpayer, had leveraged their economic power to shut down any official inquiry. And perhaps most damning, a series of payments, carefully documented, showing how families of the victims had been offered settlements in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements. Rebecca found copies of several such agreements, the amounts varying from $50,000 to $200,000 depending on whether the child had died or merely suffered permanent injury. In exchange for the sum of $75,000, the Patterson family agrees to release Clearwater Pharmaceutical from any and all liability related to the death of Jennifer Marie Patterson, and further agrees not to make any public statements connecting said death to any Clearwater product. The Pattersons, Rebecca remembered from the file, the father worked for Clearwater. They would have been completely dependent on the company for their income, their health insurance, their entire livelihood. How could they refuse such an agreement when their child was already dead and they had 2 other children to support? As the last of the daylight died completely outside, Rebecca continued exploring the hidden room by the light of her phone. She found a shelf devoted entirely to newspaper clippings, all carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. The Riverside Heights Chronicle from April 1973, mysterious illness claims 5 local children. The article mentioned the cluster of liver failure cases but quoted health officials saying there was no evidence of a common environmental cause. Another from June 1973, community mourns loss of local children. More deaths, more official statements about tragic but unexplained illness. And then, from October 1973, local nurse makes unsubstantiated claims against Riverside's largest employer. Rebecca's heart sank as she read the article about her aunt. Victoria Whitmore, a nurse at Riverside General Hospital, held a press conference yesterday making serious allegations against Clearwater Pharmaceutical. Ms. Whitmore claims that a contaminated vitamin product is responsible for a cluster of pediatric deaths over the past year. However, both the hospital administration and the state health department have strongly refuted these claims. Ms. Whitmore is not an epidemiologist or a toxicologist, said hospital administrator Gerald Fletcher. She has no expertise in this area and her allegations are both irresponsible and deeply hurtful to families still grieving. Clearwater Pharmaceutical issued a statement calling the allegations baseless and defamatory, and indicated they are considering legal action. The company's products have all received FDA approval and undergo rigorous quality testing. The articles that followed told a predictable story. Victoria Whitmore was suspended from her nursing position pending an investigation into whether she had violated patient privacy laws by discussing cases publicly. She was labeled a conspiracy theorist, attention seeker, and unstable. Her nursing license was revoked for ethical violations. And then, silence. No more articles about contaminated vitamins or mysterious deaths. The story simply disappeared. Rebecca found one final clipping, from December 1973, a small article buried on page 12, Clearwater Pharmaceutical announces voluntary product reformulation. The article mentioned that the company was updating its children's vitamin formula as part of regular quality improvements, but there was no mention of contamination, no recall, no warning to consumers. The contaminated lot had simply been quietly removed from shelves and destroyed. The company had paid off the families who threatened to sue, and the deaths of 23 children had been swept under the rug of corporate power and municipal complicity. Rebecca leaned against the filing cabinet, her phone battery warning her it was down to 15%. She needed to get out of this hidden room, needed to process what she discovered. But first, she had to document this. She couldn't risk something happening to these files before anyone else saw them. She began taking photographs with her phone, working quickly. The typewritten letter from Victoria. The patient files spread across the table. The internal memos. The settlement agreements. The newspaper clippings. Click, click, click. Her phone storage was filling up, but she kept going. When her battery warning dropped to 5%, Rebecca finally stopped. She had maybe 100 photos. Not nearly enough to capture everything in this room, but enough to prove what she'd found. Enough to show someone that this wasn't her imagination or a misunderstanding. Squeezing back through the narrow opening, Rebecca emerged into the library, now completely dark except for the dim glow of street lights through the rain-streaked windows. She was covered in soot and dust, her jacket smeared with grime, her hands black from handling decades-old documents. She checked her phone, 8:47 p.m. She'd been in that hidden room for over 3 hours, lost in the horror of what her aunt had documented. Rebecca's mind raced as she stood in the dark library. What should she do with this information? Who could she trust? The police? They were funded by city taxes, and Clearwater was the city's largest taxpayer. The media? The newspaper had actively participated in discrediting her aunt 50 years ago. A lawyer? She didn't have money for legal fees, and any competent attorney would advise her that suing one of the state's largest corporations was legal and financial suicide. And yet, doing nothing meant those 23 children had died for nothing. Meant the 15 survivors whose lives had been permanently altered would never get justice. Meant the Clearwater family would continue being celebrated as philanthropists and community leaders while hiding their family's darkest secret. "I am sorry I did not have the courage to do this myself," Victoria had written. "I hope you are braver than I was." Rebecca thought about her own failures, how she dropped out of medical school not because she couldn't handle the academics but because she couldn't handle the politics, the way certain professors had favorites, the way pharmaceutical companies courted medical students with gifts and promises of lucrative future partnerships. She'd walked away from her dream rather than compromise her principles, and where had that gotten her? Drowning in debt, working dead-end jobs, watching her 20s slip away with nothing to show for them. Maybe it was time to stop running from difficult situations. Maybe it was time to be brave, even if she had no idea what bravery would look like in this situation. Rebecca made her way to the front door, setting the alarm code the lawyer had given her, Victoria's birthdate, March 12, 1930, and locking the heavy oak door behind her. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the street was quiet, most houses already dark for the night. As she walked to her car, parked at the curb, Rebecca didn't notice the black sedan parked 3 houses down, its interior dark, its occupant watching through lightly tinted windows. The occupant, a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit, lifted a phone to his ear as Rebecca's taillights disappeared down Thornbridge Avenue. "It's Donovan," he said when the call connected. The niece spent the evening at the property. 3 hours inside, mostly in the East Wing based on the lights I could see. "She just left." A pause as he listened to the voice on the other end. "No, I couldn't see what she was doing." "But that's where the library is, isn't it? Where the old nurse." Another pause. "Understood. I'll maintain surveillance and report any contacts she makes. If she goes to the media or authorities, you want me to." The longest pause yet. "Understood, Mr. Clearwater." Discreetly. Nothing that could be traced back to the family. Just like before. Donovan ended the call and settled into wait. The Clearwater family had paid him very well over the years to handle their security concerns, the problems that couldn't be addressed through legal channels or official means. He'd made other problems disappear before. How much harder could one young woman be? Inside her apartment 2 hours north in Brookfield, Rebecca sat on her couch with her laptop, frantically backing up the photos from her phone to 3 different cloud storage services. She wasn't naive enough to think her phone couldn't be lost, stolen, or destroyed. Whatever came next, she needed these files preserved. As the upload progress bars slowly filled, Rebecca opened a new browser window and began searching for information about Victoria Whitmore. The search results were sparse and mostly dated. A few mentions of her nursing career in the 1950s and 60s. The articles about her allegations in 1973. A brief obituary from 3 months ago that mentioned her death at 93, survived by a niece, no services planned. But then Rebecca found something else, a blog post from 2019, written by someone named Diana Chen. The post was titled "My Mother's Story, A Life Cut Short by Corporate Greed." My mother, Margaret Chen, died in 1995 at the age of 47 from liver cancer. But her death certificate should have read complications from childhood liver damage sustained in 1973. When my mother was 5 years old, she was one of 15 children in Riverside Heights who survived acute liver failure caused by contaminated vitamins manufactured by Clearwater Pharmaceutical. My grandmother was paid $100,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak about what happened. My mother lived her entire life with a damaged liver, unable to drink alcohol, requiring constant medical monitoring, taking medications that made her constantly exhausted. And when the cancer came, her compromised liver meant treatment options were limited. She died 6 months after diagnosis, leaving behind a husband and 3 children who deserved more years with her. This is my mother's story. This is what corporate negligence looks like 50 years later. The blog post had 17 comments, most sympathetic, a few skeptical. One comment from someone claiming to be another survivor mentioned that at least 6 of the 15 survivors had died prematurely from liver-related complications. Rebecca clicked through to Diana Chen's profile. She was a high school science teacher living in Riverside Heights. Her social media showed a woman in her mid-30s with 2 kids, a ordinary life lived in the shadow of corporate malfeasance that had nearly killed her mother and contributed to her early death. Before she could second-guess herself, Rebecca opened her email and began typing. Dear Ms. Chen, my name is Rebecca Torres, and I am the niece of Victoria Whitmore, the nurse who first tried to expose what Clearwater Pharmaceutical did in 1973. My aunt passed away recently and left me her house. Tonight, I discovered something hidden there that I think you should see. Would you be willing to meet with me? I believe my aunt spent 50 years documenting everything, and that documentation still exists. Your mother deserved better. All the children affected deserved better. Maybe together we can finally get them justice. Sincerely, Rebecca Torres. She hit send before she could reconsider, then sat back, her heart pounding. The secret behind the fireplace had been discovered. The truth that Victoria Whitmore had spent 50 years protecting, too afraid to reveal but too principled to destroy, was now in Rebecca's hands. And in the city's wealthiest offices, people who thought a problem had been solved 50 years ago were about to learn that some truths refused to stay buried forever. Rebecca's phone buzzed. A response from Diana Chen, sent just minutes after Rebecca's email. I've been waiting for someone like you my entire life. When can we meet? Rebecca Torres didn't sleep that night. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those files, 47 children's names, 23 tiny coffins, families torn apart by corporate negligence and official complicity. She lay in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, her laptop open beside her showing the upload confirmation, 147 photos successfully backed up to 3 separate cloud services. At 3:47 a.m., her phone buzzed with another email from Diana Chen. Rebecca, I can't stop thinking about your message. I'm teaching until 3 p.m. tomorrow, but I can meet you after that. There's a coffee shop called The Grinding Stone on Market Street, quiet, private booths. 4 p.m.? I'm bringing my cousin Marcus. He was another survivor, 8 years old when it happened. He's a civil rights attorney now. I think you'll want to talk to him. Diana. A civil rights attorney. Rebecca felt a flutter of hope mixed with anxiety. She responded immediately. I'll be there. And Diana, what I found, it's bigger than I initially thought. My aunt documented everything. Internal company memos, settlement agreements, autopsy reports, hospital records. Everything. See you at 4. Rebecca. The response came within seconds. My mother told me before she died that someone would find the truth eventually. She said Victoria Whitmore was the only person who believed her, who believed all of them. I think she'd be grateful you found this. Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow changes everything. But sleep was impossible. Rebecca spent the remaining hours before dawn reading everything she could find online about Clearwater Pharmaceutical, Marcus Clearwater III, and the history of Riverside Heights. Clearwater Pharmaceutical had been founded in 1948 by Marcus Clearwater Sr., a chemist who had worked for a major pharmaceutical company during World War II. The company's early success came from manufacturing generic versions of common medications, antibiotics, pain relievers, vitamins. By the 1960s, they'd expanded into proprietary formulations and had become one of the region's major employers. Marcus Clearwater Jr. had taken over in 1967, expanding the company aggressively. The 1970s should have been a disaster for them, Rebecca realized, reading between the lines of the corporate history. Instead, the company had emerged stronger than ever, acquiring 2 smaller competitors in 1975 and 1976, opening a new manufacturing facility in 1977. The contamination crisis that should have destroyed them had somehow made them richer. Marcus Clearwater III, the current CEO, had inherited the company in 2003 after his father's death. Under his leadership, Clearwater Pharmaceutical had diversified into medical devices, hospital supplies, and even owned a chain of urgent care clinics. The company employed over 3,500 people across the state and had annual revenues exceeding $800 million. And nowhere in any official company history was there any mention of 1973, of contaminated vitamins, of dead children. Rebecca found Marcus Clearwater III's personal profile easily enough. He was 62 years old, married to Catherine Clearwater, a former hospital administrator. They had 3 adult children, all involved in various aspects of the family business. He sat on the boards of multiple charitable organizations, had endowed a chair at the State University's medical school, and had been named Philanthropist of the Year by the Regional Business Council just 6 months ago. The photograph accompanying that award showed a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, wearing an expensive suit, accepting a crystal trophy with a modest smile. The caption quoted him, "My grandfather always taught me that with great success comes great responsibility." Clearwater Pharmaceutical exists not just to generate profit, but to improve lives and strengthen communities. Rebecca felt her stomach turn. This man, celebrated as a pillar of the community, had inherited a company built on the graves of children. Did he know? Had his father told him the truth about 1973, or had Marcus III grown up believing the family mythology of ethical business practices and community service? As dawn broke over Brookfield, Rebecca showered, dressed in the most professional clothes she owned, a simple black pantsuit she'd worn to medical school interviews years ago, and made the 2-hour drive back to Riverside Heights. She arrived at the Whitmore mansion by 8 a.m., determined to spend the day cataloging everything in the hidden room properly. The house looked even more decrepit in the harsh morning light. The Victorian paint job, probably once a dignified gray with white trim, had faded to a mottled, peeling mess. Several shutters hung at odd angles. The front porch sagged alarmingly in one corner. This was a house in its final days, Rebecca thought. Another year or two and the city would condemn it regardless of who owned it. She let herself in, disabled the alarm, and went straight to the library. The fireplace opening gaped like a dark mouth, and the secret door behind it stood slightly ajar from where she'd left it the night before. This time, Rebecca came prepared. She'd stopped at a hardware store and purchased a battery-powered LED work light, heavy-duty gloves, a breathing mask, given the dust and mold, and several boxes of gallon-sized plastic bags for organizing and protecting documents. The hidden room looked different in the bright LED light, less mysterious, more utilitarian. It was clearly constructed as a deliberate addition to the house. The walls were too straight, the shelving too modern to be original to the Victorian structure. Victoria must have had this room built, probably in the late 1970s after her nursing license was revoked and she retreated into this house permanently. Rebecca started systematically, beginning with the filing cabinets. The first drawer, 1973 Patient Files AG, she had already explored. She carefully removed each file, photographed every page with her phone, then placed the originals in labeled plastic bags. 47 patient files in total, each one a tragedy, each one meticulously documented. Jennifer Patterson, age 7, who loved ballet and wanted to be a veterinarian. Dead at 7 from liver failure. Michael Chen, age 5, Diana's mother. Survived but lived with chronic health problems that eventually killed her at 47. Sofia Rodriguez, age 9, the oldest in the cluster. Survived with a liver transplant. Rebecca wondered if she was still alive, now in her late 50s. David Williams Jr., age 6. Dead. His file included a heartbreaking letter from his mother to Victoria, thanking her for being the only person who believed them, who didn't dismiss their son's death as just one of those tragic things that happens. On and on, each file a window into a family's worst nightmare. The second drawer contained follow-up documentation, letters from families, medical records tracking the survivors' ongoing health issues, newspaper articles about funerals and memorial services. Victoria had maintained contact with many of these families for years after the crisis, even after her own professional disgrace. One letter, dated 1985, 12 years after the contamination, was from Margaret Chen, Diana's grandmother. Dear Victoria, I wanted you to know that Margaret, our little Margaret, graduated from high school yesterday. The doctors said she wouldn't live to see 18, but she proved them wrong. She's still on medications, still can't do everything other kids do, but she's alive. You saved her life by figuring out what was happening when you did. If you hadn't pushed the hospital to start chelation therapy on the kids who survived those first few weeks, the doctors said Margaret would have died too. I know what standing up for the truth cost you. I know they took your license, your reputation, everything. I want you to know it wasn't for nothing. My daughter is alive because of you. Thank you. Margaret Chen. Rebecca had to stop reading, tears blurring her vision. Her aunt hadn't just documented a corporate crime. She'd been a hero who'd saved lives, and her reward had been to lose everything. The third drawer contained the smoking gun, internal Clearwater pharmaceutical documents. Rebecca couldn't imagine how Victoria had obtained these. Had she had a source inside the company? Had someone with a conscience smuggled them out? The documents told a damning story. The contamination hadn't been an accident or an unforeseeable tragedy. It had been the result of cost-cutting measures and ignored safety protocols. A memo from January 1973, 2 months before the first child got sick. Memo to Marcus Clearwater Jr., CEO. From James Peterson, Quality Control Director. Subject: Concerns regarding new supplier. Sir, I must formally object to the decision to source our vitamin D supplement from Chemcore Industries. While their pricing is 40% below our previous supplier, their quality control standards are significantly inferior. I've reviewed their facility and found multiple violations of GMP protocols. I strongly recommend we continue with our established supplier despite the higher cost. The risk to product quality is too great. J. Peterson. The response, scrawled in handwriting at the bottom of the memo. Peterson, your concerns are noted but overruled. The cost savings are necessary for our Q1 targets. Chemcore is an approved FDA supplier. That's sufficient. Implement the change as directed. M. Clearwater Jr. Another memo, from February 1973. Urgent quality control alert. Initial testing of lot #4721B shows contamination with heavy metals, specifically lead and cadmium, at levels 400% above acceptable limits. This lot should not be released for sale. Recommend immediate disposal and investigation of supplier. J. Peterson, QC Director. In the response. Peterson, retest using alternative methodology. These preliminary results are likely due to testing error. In the meantime, the lot is approved for release. We cannot afford production delays. M. Clearwater Jr. Rebecca felt physically sick reading these. Marcus Clearwater Jr. had been directly warned, multiple times, by his own quality control director that the product was contaminated and dangerous. And he had deliberately, consciously chosen to sell it anyway. The fourth drawer contained the cover-up documentation. After the first children started dying, after Victoria began asking questions at the hospital, Clearwater Pharmaceutical had gone into damage control mode. An internal memo from April 1973. Crisis Management Strategy, confidential. The pediatric deaths at Riverside General represent a potential catastrophic threat to company reputation and financial stability. Recommended actions. 1. Quietly remove all remaining units of lot #4721B from retail shelves. Destroy all inventory. 2. Approach affected families discreetly with settlement offers in exchange for NDAs. 3. Leverage our relationships with city officials and hospital administration to discourage official investigation. 4. If pressed by media, emphasize that no causal link has been established between our products and the illnesses. 5. Prepare to discredit any individual who attempts to make public accusations. Robert Shaw, Director of Public Relations. They had followed their own playbook perfectly. Rebecca found copies of the settlement agreements, 19 in total. The families of the 23 children who died had all been approached. 19 had accepted payments ranging from $50,000 to $200,000 in exchange for signing NDAs and releasing Clearwater from liability. 4 families had refused. Rebecca found the notes about them in a separate file. Patterson family, refused settlement. Father is Clearwater employee, applied pressure through management. Threatened with termination if legal action pursued. Eventually accepted $75,000 settlement after 6 months. Williams family, refused settlement. No direct leverage. Referred to legal for intimidation strategy. Eventually accepted $100,000 after legal fees from preliminary lawsuit bankrupted them. Martinez family, refused settlement. Mother is school teacher, father is postal worker. No direct leverage. Smear campaign initiated, questions raised about family's fitness as parents, CPS investigation requested anonymously. Accepted $150,000 settlement. Taylor family, refused settlement and refused intimidation. Father is attorney. Family relocated to another state rather than accept settlement. Filed lawsuit from new jurisdiction but case dismissed on procedural grounds. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. These were families who had lost children, and Clearwater Pharmaceutical had systematically destroyed them financially, professionally, and emotionally to protect the company's reputation. Rebecca found the documentation of Victoria's own destruction in the 5th drawer. It was labeled simply VMW retaliation. After Victoria had held her press conference in October 1973, Clearwater had unleashed every weapon in their arsenal. They'd had their attorneys file ethics complaints with the state nursing board, alleging that Victoria had violated patient privacy laws by discussing cases publicly. Never mind that she'd never mentioned patients by name, never provided identifying details beyond what was necessary to establish the pattern. They'd pressured Riverside General Hospital's administration to suspend Victoria immediately and launch their own investigation. The hospital had complied. Rebecca found the internal memos. The hospital's largest donor was the Clearwater Family Foundation, which provided millions in annual funding. They'd hired a private investigator to dig into Victoria's personal life, looking for anything that could be used to discredit her. The investigator's report was in the file. Subject has no criminal record, no history of mental illness, no financial improprieties, no substance abuse issues, no personal scandals. Subject is, by all accounts, a dedicated professional with an exemplary record. Unable to find actionable material for character assassination. So they'd simply lied. Anonymous sources quoted in newspaper articles had called Victoria emotionally unstable, known for erratic behavior, and possibly suffering from paranoid delusions. None of it was true, but by the time Victoria could respond, the narrative had been set. Her nursing license had been revoked in January 1974 for gross violations of patient confidentiality and professional ethics. The decision had been issued by a 3-person board, 2 of whom, Rebecca discovered from Victoria's notes, had received significant campaign donations from Clearwater Pharmaceutical in the previous election cycle. They were elected positions, the nursing board members, and Clearwater had bought them. Victoria had appealed, of course. But her appeal had been denied. She'd hired an attorney to fight the decision, but legal fees had quickly exhausted her savings. By mid-1974, she was broke, unemployable in her profession, and publicly labeled as a disgraced nurse who had made false accusations against a respected company. She'd retreated into this house, the family mansion she'd inherited from her parents, and essentially disappeared from public life. But she hadn't given up. She'd spent the next 25 years collecting evidence, documenting everything, maintaining contact with affected families, and waiting for, what? An opportunity that never came? Someone brave enough to carry on her fight? Rebecca found Victoria's personal journals in the bottom drawer of the last filing cabinet. Decades of entries, chronicling her investigation, her frustration, her fear, and her determination. An entry from November 1974. They've won, or so they think. I have no license, No income, no credibility. The families are silenced by NDAs and fear. The hospital won't speak to me. The newspapers have moved on to other stories. But I have the truth. I have the documents. Someday, somehow, this will matter. I have to believe that. Otherwise, those children died for nothing. An entry from March 1982. Margaret Chen's daughter Margaret called today. She's 12 now, still struggling with health issues but alive. She wanted to thank me for helping save her mother. She said when she grows up, she wants to be a teacher so she can help other kids the way I helped her mom. I cried after we hung up. At least one life saved. At least that. An entry from June 1995. Marcus Clearwater Jr. died today. Heart attack at 73. The newspaper called him a titan of industry, a philanthropist, a community leader. They mentioned his charitable donations, his business acumen, his dedication to public health. Not one word about 1973. Not one word about the children his decisions killed. History will remember him as a great man. Only I know the truth, I and the families who signed those NDAs. His son Marcus III is taking over the company now. Does he know what his father did? Does he care? Or is he just another Clearwater, putting profit above everything else? An entry from September 2019. I'm 89 years old today. Most of my contemporaries are gone. Many of the parents who lost children in 1973 are dead now too. The survivors are middle-aged, their lives forever marked by what happened to them as children. I've maintained this archive for 46 years, but to what end? I'm too old, too tired to fight anymore. Perhaps I should just let it go, let history bury these secrets with me. But then I remember Jennifer Patterson's mother asking me why no one would listen, why no one cared that her daughter died. I couldn't answer her then. I won't dishonor her memory by giving up now. And finally, the last entry, dated December 2024, just 4 months before Victoria's death. My heart is failing. The doctors give me 6 months at most. I've made arrangements to leave everything to Daniel's daughter Rebecca. I don't know her, we've never met. Daniel kept his distance after I became infamous, protecting his own family by association. I don't blame him. But I've followed Rebecca's life from afar through occasional internet searches. She's smart, principled, she walked away from medical school rather than compromise her values. Maybe she has the courage I lost. Maybe she'll know what to do with the truth I've spent a lifetime protecting. If you're reading this, Rebecca, I'm sorry to burden you with this. But someone needs to know. Someone needs to care. Those children deserve justice, even if it comes 50 years too late. Rebecca sat on the floor of the hidden room, her aunt's journal open in her lap, tears streaming down her face. Victoria had known. She'd known that Rebecca had dropped out of medical school, had followed her life, had chosen her specifically to inherit this responsibility. The weight of it was crushing. 23 dead children, 15 survivors still dealing with health consequences, families silenced and intimidated, a company built on blood money and protected by official corruption. And now it was Rebecca's job to decide what to do about it. She checked her phone, 2:47 p.m. Her meeting with Diana Chen and her cousin Marcus was in just over an hour. Rebecca carefully packed the most important documents into a messenger bag, the patient files, the internal memos, the settlement agreements, Victoria's journals. Everything else she photographed, spending another hour methodically documenting every page of every document in that hidden room. By the time she finished, her phone storage was completely full and her backup battery was drained. But she had it all, thousands of pages of evidence, enough to prove beyond any doubt that Clearwater Pharmaceutical had knowingly sold contaminated products, had deliberately covered up the resulting deaths, and had systematically destroyed anyone who tried to expose the truth. Rebecca sealed the hidden room, making sure the fireplace mechanism was locked. She couldn't risk someone else discovering it before she decided what to do with the information. As she drove across Riverside Heights toward Market Street and the Grinding Stone coffee shop, Rebecca noticed a black sedan several cars behind her. It maintained the same distance for several blocks, never quite catching up but never falling behind. When she turned onto Market Street, the sedan continued straight. Paranoia, she told herself. Just her imagination running wild after a day immersed in corporate conspiracies and cover-ups. But in that black sedan, Donovan was already on the phone. She spent all day at the house, he reported. Left about 40 minutes ago carrying a large bag, looked heavy. Now she's heading toward downtown. Want me to continue surveillance? Yes, came Marcus Clearwater III's voice, cold and controlled. And find out who she's meeting. I want to know everyone she talks to, everyone who knows about whatever she found. We've kept this buried for 50 years. We're not going to lose control now because one stubborn woman couldn't leave well enough alone. Understood, sir. What if she goes to the police? She won't. Not yet. She's smart enough to know they can't help her, not against us. But watch her carefully. And Donovan? If this situation requires the kind of permanent solution we've used before, I trust you'll be discreet. Always am, Mr. Clearwater. The grinding stone was exactly as Diana had described, quiet, dimly lit, with high-backed booths that offered privacy. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner, away from the windows and other customers. At exactly 4 p.m., 2 people entered the coffee shop. The woman was in her mid-30s, Asian features, shoulder-length black hair, wearing teacher casual clothes, slacks and a cardigan. The man with her was slightly older, maybe 40, also Asian, dressed in a well-tailored suit that spoke of professional success. They spotted Rebecca immediately. Diana had apparently been shown Rebecca's social media photo, and approached the booth. Rebecca Torres? Diana asked, her voice soft but intense. That's me. Diana? Diana nodded and slid into the booth across from Rebecca, her cousin following. This is Marcus Chen. He's the attorney I mentioned. He was 8 when it happened. Marcus extended his hand, and Rebecca shook it. His grip was firm, professional, but his eyes held something else, deep pain barely concealed beneath years of emotional control. My cousin told me what you found, Marcus said, his voice measured. Before we go any further, I need to know, do you understand what you're potentially involving yourself in? Clearwater Pharmaceutical is one of the most powerful corporations in this state. They have unlimited legal resources, political connections at every level of government, and a history of destroying anyone who threatens them. If we pursue this, your life will never be the same. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. My Aunt Victoria spent 50 years of her life documenting their crimes. She lost her career, her reputation, everything, trying to expose what they did. I can't just ignore that. I won't. Good, Marcus said, and for the first time, he smiled slightly. Because neither will we. Diana and I have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time. So, tell us, what exactly did you find? Rebecca opened her messenger bag and began removing files. As she laid them on the table, Diana's hand went to her mouth, and Marcus leaned forward, his professional composure cracking. These are the original patient files, Rebecca explained. 47 cases, including your mother, Diana. And Marcus, I think you're probably in here too. Marcus reached for one of the files with shaking hands. Chen, Marcus. Age 8. Admitted April 1973. His voice broke. I've never seen my actual medical records from that time. My grandmother refused to talk about it, said it was too painful. All I remember is being so sick I wanted to die, and then months in the hospital, and then, being different than other kids after that. Always tired. Always limited in what I could do. Diana was reading through her mother's file, tears streaming down her face. Mom said the nurse, Victoria Whitmore, was the only one who believed something was wrong, who pushed the doctors to test for environmental causes. She said Victoria saved her life. She looked up at Rebecca. Your aunt saved my mother's life. And the hospital destroyed her for it. The hospital and Clearwater Pharmaceutical together, Rebecca confirmed. She pulled out the internal memos next. These show they knew the product was contaminated before they ever sold it. Their own quality control director warned them multiple times. They sold it anyway. Marcus read through the memos, his professional training taking over, his eyes scanning documents with the practiced efficiency of an attorney reviewing evidence. When he finished, he sat back, his expression a mixture of rage and grim satisfaction. "This is bulletproof," he said quietly. "This is the kind of evidence that destroys companies. Internal memos, quality control warnings, settlement agreements with NDAs, it proves everything. Knowing endangerment, deliberate cover-up, witness intimidation. We could bring criminal charges, not just civil. People could go to prison for this." "After 50 years? Rebecca asked doubtfully. "Isn't there a statute of limitations?" "For fraud and conspiracy, it's 6 years from when the crime was discovered, not when it was committed," Marcus explained. "And this was never discovered, it was actively concealed. A good prosecutor could argue the statute never started running. But even if criminal charges are impossible, the civil case is ironclad. Wrongful death, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, we could sue for hundreds of millions." "We?" Rebecca repeated. Marcus and Diana exchanged glances. "There are 15 survivors," Diana said. "Marcus and my mother, God rest her, and 13 others. We've stayed in touch over the years, formed a kind of informal support group. We all signed NDAs when we were children, our parents signed them, but if what you're saying is true, those NDAs were obtained through fraud and intimidation. They're not enforceable. We've been waiting for evidence like this," Marcus added. "Without it, we're just conspiracy theorists talking about something that happened half a century ago. But with this documentation," he gestured at the files spread across the table, "this changes everything." Rebecca felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. "What do we do next?" Marcus considered carefully. "First, we secure this evidence. Multiple copies, with multiple people, in multiple locations. If something happens to you, or to these original documents, we need to ensure the information survives. I've already backed up photos to 3 cloud services," Rebecca said. "Good. Send copies to both of us as well. Then we need to contact the other survivors, show them what we have, see who's willing to join a lawsuit. We'll need at least 5 plaintiffs to make this work. And we need to go public," Diana added. "Not immediately, but soon. Once Clearwater learns what we're doing, they'll try to shut us down, just like they did to your aunt. Our only protection is publicity. If the whole city knows what we're alleging, it's harder for them to make us disappear." "Disappear?" Rebecca echoed, a chill running down her spine. Marcus's expression darkened. "Clearwater Pharmaceutical has a history. People who've threatened to expose them have had unfortunate accidents over the years. A quality control inspector who was going to testify in an unrelated lawsuit in 1985, died in a hit-and-run that was never solved. A journalist who was investigating them in 1998, committed suicide, supposedly, though his family insisted he wasn't suicidal. I'm not saying Clearwater definitely killed these people, but the coincidences are troubling." Rebecca thought about the black sedan she'd noticed earlier. "I think someone might be following me." Both Diana and Marcus became very alert. "Describe them," Marcus said sharply. "Just a black sedan, I saw it behind me on the way here. It didn't follow me into the parking lot though." "That's exactly how professional surveillance works," Marcus said grimly. "They don't follow you directly to your destination, they follow you most of the way, then break off before you could identify them as tailing you. Rebecca, starting right now, you need to take precautions. Vary your routes, watch for people or cars that appear multiple times, don't go anywhere alone if you can help it, and most importantly, don't go back to that house alone. If someone is surveilling you, they know you found something there." Rebecca's hands had started shaking. This was real. This wasn't just a historical injustice she'd uncovered, this was a present, active threat. "I have more documents at the house," she said. "Boxes of them. I couldn't carry everything. Then we go get them together, Diana said firmly. Tomorrow. All three of us. Safety in numbers. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing everything Rebecca had photographed, making plans, discussing strategy. Marcus took careful notes, already building the framework for a lawsuit. Diana contacted 3 other survivors, women now in their 50s, who lived in the area and might be willing to meet. By the time they left the grinding stone, it was after 7 p.m. and fully dark outside. Marcus walked Rebecca to her car, checking the parking lot carefully before letting her unlock it. Check your car before you get in, he instructed. Look under it, in the back seat. I know it sounds paranoid, but better safe than sorry. Rebecca did as he instructed, feeling foolish but also frightened. Nothing seemed amiss. Her car was just her car, old, dented, but familiar and safe. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Marcus said. We'll meet at the house. Bring boxes, lots of them. We're going to remove every document from that hidden room and secure them somewhere Clearwater can't reach. Okay, Rebecca agreed. And Marcus? Thank you. For believing me, for helping, for everything. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Your aunt tried to save us 50 years ago and lost everything. The least we can do is finish what she started. As Rebecca drove back to Brookfield, she kept checking her rearview mirror obsessively. Every car behind her seemed suspicious, every vehicle that maintained the same speed or took the same turns. By the time she reached her apartment, she was exhausted from the stress of constant vigilance. She parked in her usual spot, grabbed her messenger bag with the precious files, and headed toward her building's entrance. The parking lot was poorly lit, as always, the landlord too cheap to replace burned-out bulbs. Rebecca was halfway to the door when she heard footsteps behind her, quick and purposeful. She spun around, her heart in her throat, and found herself face to face with a man in his 40s, expensive suit, cold eyes. He was holding something in his hand, and it took Rebecca a moment to realize it was just a business card. Miss Torres, he said, his voice smooth and professional. My name is Richard Donovan. I'm head of security for Clearwater Pharmaceutical. Mr. Clearwater would like to speak with you about a matter of mutual interest. He's prepared to offer you very generous compensation for your time. Rebecca's mind raced. This was happening already, less than 24 hours after her discovery, and they were already approaching her. I don't have anything to discuss with Clearwater Pharmaceutical, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Clearwater is aware that you've discovered some documents at your late aunt's property, Donovan continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Documents relating to an unfortunate incident from many years ago. He'd like to discuss those documents with you privately, perhaps come to an arrangement that would be beneficial for everyone involved. An arrangement, Rebecca repeated. You mean like the arrangements you made with the families of the children your company killed? The ones where you paid them to stay silent? Donovan's pleasant expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Ms. Torres, you've stumbled into a very complex situation that you don't fully understand. There are legal obligations, confidentiality agreements, binding settlements that were made decades ago. Disrupting those arrangements would be problematic for many people. Problematic, Rebecca said, her fear giving way to anger. 23 children died because your company knowingly sold contaminated products. And you think the problem is that someone might talk about it? Ancient history, Donovan said dismissively. Everyone involved has moved on. The families were compensated. The survivors received medical care. Rehashing these events serves no purpose except to cause pain. Justice serves a purpose, Rebecca shot back. Truth serves a purpose. Donovan sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. Ms. Torres, be reasonable. You're in debt, you've inherited a worthless property with significant tax obligations. Mr. Clearwater is prepared to offer you $2 million for that property and all documents currently stored there. You could pay off your debts, start fresh, live comfortably. All you have to do is sign a confidentiality agreement and walk away. $2 million. Enough to change her life completely, to erase all her financial problems, to start over with a clean slate. "I'm not for sale," Rebecca said. "And neither is the truth about what your company did." Donovan's expression hardened. "I've given you an opportunity to resolve this amicably. If you refuse, things will become much more difficult for you. Mr. Clearwater has extensive resources and is prepared to use them. Legal resources, political connections, and yes, other methods as well." "Are you threatening me?" Rebecca demanded. "I'm informing you of reality," Donovan replied. "You're one person, drowning in debt, with no legal standing and no resources. Clearwater Pharmaceutical is a $800 million corporation with the best attorneys in the state. This isn't a fair fight, Ms. Torres. Take the money. Walk away. Let the past stay buried where it belongs." "The past is never dead," Rebecca quoted. "It's not even past. That's Faulkner." "Literature won't protect you," Donovan said. "But money could. Think about it." He placed the business card on the hood of her car. "You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, our offer expires and you'll be on your own against the full weight of Clearwater's opposition." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot. A moment later, Rebecca heard a car engine start, and a black sedan, of course it was a black sedan, pulled out of a spot she hadn't noticed and drove away. Rebecca stood alone in the poorly lit parking lot, shaking with adrenaline and rage. They'd found her in less than 24 hours. They knew what she'd discovered. They were watching her, following her, cataloging everyone she met with. And they'd just threatened her, politely but unmistakably. She picked up the business card Donovan had left, Richard Donovan, Director of Corporate Security, Clearwater Pharmaceutical, with a phone number and email address. Rebecca took a photo of the card, then tore it into pieces and dropped them in a trash can. Then she ran to her apartment, locked every lock, checked every window, and immediately called Marcus Chen. "They just approached me," she said when he answered, her voice shaking. "A man named Richard Donovan, from Clearwater's security department. He offered me $2 million to sell the house and sign an NDA. When I refused, he threatened me." There was a long pause. "Threatened you how, exactly?" Rebecca recounted the conversation as precisely as she could remember. When she finished, Marcus swore softly. "They're moving faster than I expected," he said. "That's actually good news, believe it or not. It means they're scared, acting out of fear rather than from a position of strength. Donovan's job is to intimidate people into backing down. Don't let him." "Easy for you to say," Rebecca muttered. She opened a secret door behind the fireplace. What was inside changed her life forever. Marcus Chen's voice became firm, almost commanding. "Listen to me, Rebecca. You're not alone in this anymore. I'm filing a motion for a temporary restraining order against Clearwater Pharmaceutical first thing tomorrow morning, citing witness intimidation and harassment. And we're accelerating our timeline. No more waiting. We go public now, before they can shut us down." "Go public how?" Rebecca asked, still shaking from her encounter with Donovan. "I have a contact at the Riverside Chronicle, investigative reporter named James Wu. He's been wanting to write about Clearwater for years but never had enough evidence. Now we do. I'm calling him tonight. Tomorrow morning, we meet at your aunt's house, secure all the documents, and by tomorrow afternoon, we hand everything over to Wu. By Friday, this story will be front-page news." "That fast?" Rebecca felt simultaneously terrified and relieved. "It has to be that fast. Clearwater is already moving against you. Our only defense is to make this so public they can't make it disappear. Can you stay somewhere else tonight? Not your apartment?" Rebecca thought frantically. I have a friend from college who lives about an hour north. Sarah Mendez. I could call her. Do it. Pack a bag, drive there tonight, don't tell anyone where you're going except me and Diana. And Rebecca? Vary your route. If you think you're being followed, drive to a police station instead. Donovan won't risk approaching you there. After they hung up, Rebecca threw clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands, grabbed her laptop and the messenger bag with Victoria's files, and left her apartment. She sat in her car for several minutes, watching the parking lot and street, looking for any sign of surveillance. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean much. The drive to Sarah's apartment was nerve-wracking. Rebecca took random turns, doubled back several times, and kept constant watch on her mirrors. If anyone was following her, they were far more skilled than she could detect. Sarah Mendez, her former roommate from undergrad, opened the door in pajamas looking confused but concerned. "Becca? What's wrong? You sounded terrified on the phone. Can I stay here tonight? Maybe tomorrow too? I'll explain everything, but I need to know if I'm putting you in any danger by being here." Sarah pulled her inside. "Danger? What the hell is going on?" Over the next 2 hours, Rebecca explained everything: the inherited mansion, the hidden room behind the fireplace, the documents exposing Clearwater Pharmaceutical's deadly cover-up, the survivors she'd met, and the threatening approach from Donovan in her parking lot. Sarah listened with growing shock and anger. She was a social worker now, someone who dedicated her life to helping vulnerable people, and the story of poisoned children and silenced families hit her hard. "Those bastards," she said when Rebecca finished. "They killed kids and got away with it for 50 years? Until now," Rebecca said. "Tomorrow we're going public." "But Sarah, if you want me to leave, I understand. These are dangerous people. Don't be ridiculous. You're staying here as long as you need to. And tomorrow, I'm coming with you. You're not facing this alone." Rebecca felt tears of gratitude welling up. "Thank you." That night, sleeping on Sarah's couch, Rebecca dreamed of children's voices calling from behind walls, asking why no one had listened, why no one had cared. She woke at 6 a.m., exhausted but determined. At exactly 9 a.m., Rebecca pulled up to the Whitmore mansion with Sarah in the passenger seat. Marcus Chin was already there, along with Diana and 2 other people, an older woman and a middle-aged man, both Asian. "Rebecca, this is my Aunt Linda," Diana introduced the older woman. "Another survivor. She was 6 when it happened. And this is Dr. Robert Kim, a toxicologist. He's volunteered to review the medical evidence and provide expert testimony." Dr. Kim shook Rebecca's hand firmly. What Clearwater did wasn't just negligent, it was criminal. Heavy metal poisoning in children's vitamins? That's not an accident, that's knowing endangerment. I want to help you prove it. Marcus had brought a truck and dozens of boxes. Let's move fast. I don't trust that we won't be interrupted. They worked systematically, forming a human chain from the hidden room behind the fireplace to Marcus's truck parked at the curb. Filing cabinets were emptied, boxes were packed, everything was catalogued and photographed. Victoria's meticulous archive, 50 years of careful documentation, was finally leaving its hiding place. It took 3 hours to empty the hidden room completely. As they were loading the last boxes, a black Mercedes pulled up across the street and Marcus Clearwater III himself stepped out, accompanied by Richard Donovan and 2 other men in suits who screamed lawyer. Marcus Clearwater III was exactly as his photos suggested: distinguished silver hair, expensive tailored suit, the bearing of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He approached with confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Marcus Chen," Clearwater said, his voice pleasant but cold. "I should have known you'd be involved in this. You've been trying to destroy my family's company for years." "No, Mr. Clearwater," Marcus replied calmly. "I've been trying to get justice for what your family's company did to me and dozens of other children. There's a difference." Clearwater's gaze shifted to Rebecca. "Ms. Torres, I presume. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I had hoped we could resolve this privately." "You mean you hoped you could buy my silence," Rebecca said. "Like you bought the silence of all those families 50 years ago." "Those families were compensated fairly for their losses," Clearwater said. "And they agreed, voluntarily, to move forward rather than dwell on tragedy. What you're doing here, reopening old wounds, will help no one. Justice helps everyone, Diana interjected. Even if it comes 50 years late. My mother suffered her entire life because of what your company did. She died at 47 from liver cancer caused by the damage she sustained as a child. She deserved better. We all did. Clearwater's expression hardened. You're referring to events that allegedly occurred half a century ago, during my father's tenure. Even if your claims had merit, which they don't, the statute of limitations has long since expired. You have no legal standing. That's where you're wrong, Marcus said, stepping forward. The statute of limitations for fraud doesn't begin until the fraud is discovered. Your company actively concealed evidence, intimidated witnesses, and suppressed the truth for 5 decades. That's ongoing conspiracy, and the clock doesn't start until the concealment ends. Which is right now. One of Clearwater's lawyers stepped forward. Any documents you've removed from this property were obtained illegally. They're not admissible in court. They're not your documents, Rebecca countered. They belong to my Aunt Victoria Whitmore, and she left everything to me. These are my property, legally inherited, and I can do whatever I want with them. Including the internal Clearwater pharmaceutical memos, the lawyer pressed. Those are proprietary corporate documents. Their possession by your aunt was theft, and their use by you would constitute trafficking in stolen property. Whistleblower protection laws disagree, Marcus said smoothly. Whoever provided Victoria Whitmore with those documents was exposing corporate malfeasance that resulted in deaths. That's protected disclosure. Your company can't claim theft when the documents prove criminal activity. The legal posturing continued for several minutes, but Rebecca could see the growing frustration in Marcus Clearwater III's face. He wasn't used to being challenged, wasn't accustomed to people who couldn't be intimidated or bought. Finally, he changed tactics. Miss Torres, you seem like a reasonable person. Let me be direct with you. If you pursue this vendetta, Clearwater Pharmaceutical will defend itself vigorously. We will file countersuits for defamation, theft of proprietary information, and tortious interference with business relationships. We will tie you up in court for years, drain your resources, destroy your credit. By the time we're done, you'll have nothing left. Accept the truth, Rebecca said quietly. I'll still have that. The truth? Clearwater laughed bitterly. The truth is that my grandfather and father built a company that employs 3,500 people and provides essential medications to millions. The truth is that Clearwater Pharmaceutical has donated hundreds of millions to medical research, funded hospitals and clinics, improved public health across this entire region. And you want to destroy all that because of one unfortunate incident from 1973? 23 children died, Rebecca said, her voice rising. 23. And your father knew the product was contaminated before he ever sold it. That's not an unfortunate incident, Mr. Clearwater. That's murder. The word hung in the air like a curse. Murder. Everyone fell silent. Marcus Clearwater III's face went white with rage. You have no proof of that accusation. That's defamation per se, Ms. Torres. My attorneys will be filing suit immediately. Actually, Dr. Kim spoke up for the first time. She has substantial proof. I've reviewed the internal memos from your quality control director. He warned your father, in writing, that lot #4721B was contaminated with heavy metals at levels 400% above safe limits. Your father ordered the lot released for sale anyway. That's knowing endangerment resulting in death. In criminal law, that's called depraved indifference murder. You're not a lawyer, Clearwater snapped. No, but I am an expert toxicologist who's testified in criminal cases before, Dr. Kim replied calmly. And I'll be happy to testify again about exactly what your father did and what the foreseeable consequences were. Richard Donovan whispered something to Clearwater, who nodded curtly. The entire group turned to leave, but Clearwater paused at his car door. You're making a terrible mistake, he called back. All of you. This isn't over. You're right, Marcus Chin replied. It's just beginning. After the Mercedes drove away, the group stood in tense silence for a moment before Diana let out a shaky laugh. That actually happened. We just told Marcus Clearwater III to his face that his family company committed murder. And lived to tell about it, Sarah added, trying for humor but sounding nervous. We need to move faster now, Marcus said urgently. That confrontation means they know we're serious. They'll escalate. Rebecca, you're coming to my office. We're meeting James Wu from the Chronicle in exactly 45 minutes. The rest of you, help me unload these boxes at my office, then get somewhere safe. Don't go home, don't follow predictable patterns, and stay in groups. The meeting with James Wu, investigative reporter for the Riverside Chronicle, took place in Marcus Chen's law office, a modest suite in a professional building downtown. Wu was younger than Rebecca expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a reputation for tenacious reporting that had won him several state journalism awards. Marcus laid out the entire case, methodically showing Wu the documents, patient files, internal memos, settlement agreements, Victoria's journals, autopsy reports, witness statements. The evidence that Clearwater Pharmaceutical had knowingly sold contaminated products and deliberately covered up the resulting deaths. Wu took notes rapidly, occasionally stopping to photograph documents with his phone. This is incredible, he said quietly. This is Pulitzer-level journalism if we can verify it independently. But Rebecca, Marcus, you need to understand what you're walking into. Clearwater will come at you with everything they have. They'll attack your credibility, dig into your personal lives, find every mistake you've ever made and magnify it. I know, Rebecca said. They already offered me $2 million to stay quiet. Wu's eyebrows shot up. You turned down $2 million? Some things aren't for sale. Good answer, Wu said with approval. But they'll make you regret it. Clearwater has sued 3 different journalists in the past 20 years for stories they didn't like. They have a reputation for aggressive litigation that scares most media outlets into killing stories before publication. Will the Chronicle kill this story? Diana asked nervously. Wu's expression hardened. Not if I can help it. This is exactly the kind of corporate malfeasance that journalism exists to expose. But I'll need to verify everything independently. I can't rely solely on 50-year-old documents that Clearwater will claim are forgeries. The survivors can verify it, Marcus said. There are 15 of us still alive. We all have medical records showing acute liver failure in 1973. We can provide testimony, medical documentation, everything you need to corroborate the documents. And I can verify the toxicology, Dr. Kim added. Heavy metal poisoning leaves specific markers. If any of the survivors still have tissue samples or medical records from 1973, I can prove the contamination scientifically. Wu nodded slowly. Okay. Here's how this works. I need 3 days to verify everything, interview survivors, talk to medical experts, and try to get comment from Clearwater. I'll write the story, submit it to my editors, and we'll see if legal clears it for publication. If they do, it runs this Sunday, front page, above the fold. And if legal doesn't clear it? Rebecca asked. Then I quit and take the story to a national outlet that has bigger legal resources, Wu said bluntly. This story is getting published one way or another. I promise you that. Over the next 3 days, Rebecca's life became surreal. She stayed with Sarah, never sleeping in the same place 2 nights in a row. Marcus filed the restraining order against Clearwater, which was granted on a temporary basis. Diana and Marcus Chen organized a meeting of all 15 survivors, 8 of whom agreed to come forward publicly as plaintiffs in a lawsuit. James Wu worked around the clock, interviewing survivors, consulting medical experts, reviewing hospital records from 1973 that Victoria had painstakingly copied, and trying unsuccessfully to get Clearwater Pharmaceutical to comment beyond their legal team's terse no comment on pending litigation. Dr. Kim performed medical forensics on 3 survivors who still had tissue samples from their 1973 hospitalizations. His analysis confirmed elevated levels of lead and cadmium consistent with contamination, exactly as Victoria's investigation had claimed. Meanwhile, Clearwater Pharmaceutical launched a preemptive strike. On Thursday, they held a press conference announcing that malicious false allegations were being made against the company regarding events from 50 years ago. Marcus Clearwater III, looking solemn and dignified, spoke about his family's proud history of public service and charitable giving. He portrayed Rebecca and Marcus Chen as opportunists seeking to profit from tragedy, implied that Victoria Whitmore had been mentally unstable, and suggested the whole thing was an elaborate fraud. The press conference generated significant local media coverage, but it also had an unintended effect. It made people curious about what allegations Clearwater was denying so strenuously. On Saturday evening, James Wu called Rebecca with news. "It's running tomorrow. Front page." The legal team cleared it, barely. The Chronicle's publisher is terrified of being sued, but the editors agreed the public interest outweighed the legal risks. The headline is 50-year cover-up, Did Clearwater Pharmaceutical Kill Children and Silence Victims? Rebecca felt her knees go weak with relief. "Thank you, James. Thank you for believing us." "Thank your Aunt Victoria," Wu replied. Without her documentation, this story dies in legal review as unverifiable conspiracy theory. She spent 50 years building an airtight case. I'm just the guy who finally gets to tell it. Sunday morning, Rebecca woke before dawn and drove to a convenience store to buy copies of the Riverside Chronicle. There it was, front page, above the fold, exactly as Wu had promised. 50-year cover-up, Did Clearwater Pharmaceutical Kill Children and Silence Victims? Newly discovered documents revealed deadly contamination, corporate negligence, and systematic intimidation of families. The article was devastating and meticulously documented. Wu had done his homework, interviewing 8 survivors on the record, consulting 3 independent medical experts, reviewing hospital statistics showing the unusual cluster of pediatric liver failures in 1973, and presenting the internal Clearwater memos that proved the company knew about the contamination before releasing the product. He'd included photographs of some of the children who died, provided by their families, smiling kids who should have lived full lives but never got the chance. Jennifer Patterson, age 7, in her ballet costume. David Williams Jr., age 6, holding a baseball bat. Sofia Rodriguez, age 9, had survived, on her 10th birthday shortly before she became ill. The article quoted Rebecca extensively about discovering Victoria's hidden archive, and it vindicated Victoria herself, portraying her not as the unstable conspiracy theorist Clearwater had branded her, but as a heroic whistleblower who'd been destroyed for telling the truth. Most damning of all, Wu had tracked down James Peterson, the former quality control director who'd warned Marcus Clearwater Jr. about the contamination. Now 87 and living in a retirement community in Florida, Peterson confirmed on the record that he'd repeatedly warned his boss the product was dangerous and had been ordered to release it anyway. "I've carried that guilt for 50 years, Peterson was quoted as saying. 23 children died because I didn't have the courage to go public like Nurse Whitmore did. I was afraid of losing my job, losing my pension. I chose security over conscience, and innocent children paid the price. I hope this investigation finally brings some accountability." By noon Sunday, the story had exploded across social media and been picked up by national news outlets. By evening, the state attorney general had announced a formal investigation into Clearwater Pharmaceutical's actions. By Monday morning, the FBI had opened a criminal inquiry into corporate fraud and obstruction of justice. The courthouse in Riverside Heights became a media circus on Monday when Marcus Chen filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of 15 survivors and the families of 23 deceased children. The lawsuit sought $500 million in damages and requested that Clearwater Pharmaceutical's business licenses be revoked pending investigation. Rebecca found herself suddenly thrust into the spotlight, giving interviews, explaining how she'd discovered Victoria's archive, talking about her aunt's 50-year quest for justice. The story captured national attention, a nearly century-old cover-up finally exposed, David versus Goliath, ordinary citizens against corporate power. Clearwater Pharmaceutical initially tried to fight back, issuing denials, attacking the credibility of witnesses, filing countersuits. But the evidence was too strong, the documentation too thorough, the medical proof too conclusive. Within 2 weeks, 3 members of Clearwater's board of directors had resigned. Within a month, major retailers began pulling Clearwater products from their shelves pending the investigation. Marcus Clearwater III held one final press conference in late November, 6 weeks after the story broke. He looked diminished, exhausted, defeated. After careful review of historical documents and consultation with independent experts, he read from a prepared statement, his voice hollow. Clearwater Pharmaceutical acknowledges that serious failures in quality control and corporate oversight occurred in 1973, resulting in tragic loss of life. The actions of company leadership at that time, including my father Marcus Clearwater Jr., were inexcusable and caused immeasurable harm to innocent families. We deeply apologize to the victims, the survivors, and their families. It was a carefully worded non-admission admission, crafted by lawyers to minimize legal exposure while acknowledging reality. But it was also a surrender. The settlement negotiations took months. Marcus Chen, representing the survivors and victims' families, negotiated aggressively. The final settlement, approved by the court in March, included $750 million in compensation to be distributed among survivors and families of deceased children. Establishment of a $200 million medical trust fund for ongoing health care for survivors. Public apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Funding for a memorial to the victims. Complete release of all internal documents related to the 1973 contamination. Agreement not to enforce any previously signed NDAs. Marcus Clearwater III resigned as CEO, and the company was sold to a national pharmaceutical conglomerate that immediately implemented new quality control protocols and corporate governance structures. For Rebecca, the months that followed were overwhelming. She paid off her medical school debts, finished her degree, and was accepted into a residency program with a focus on public health and patient advocacy. The Whitmore mansion, which had seemed like a burden, became a memorial and archive, the Victoria Whitmore Center for Medical Ethics and Whistleblower Support, funded by a portion of the settlement. The hidden room behind the fireplace was preserved exactly as Victoria had left it, a testament to one woman's courage and persistence in the face of overwhelming opposition. On a sunny day in June, nearly 8 months after Rebecca had first discovered Victoria's secret archive, a dedication ceremony was held at the Victoria Whitmore Center. Survivors, now in their 50s and 60s, gathered to honor the nurse who had tried to save them 50 years ago. Families of the children who died came to remember their lost loved ones. Medical students, journalism students, and ethics professors came to learn from history. Rebecca stood before the assembled crowd, looking at the photograph of young Victoria Whitmore in her nurse's uniform, smiling confidently in 1952 before everything fell apart, and read from her aunt's final journal entry. If you're reading this, Rebecca, I'm sorry to burden you with this. But someone needs to know. Someone needs to care. Those children deserve justice, even if it comes 50 years too late. Rebecca looked up at the crowd, at Diana Chen and her children, at Marcus Chen and the other survivors, at the families who had suffered in silence for half a century. Justice did come 50 years too late, Rebecca said, her voice clear and strong. But it came. Because my Aunt Victoria refused to let the truth die. Because she chose courage over comfort, principle over profit, and truth over silence. She lost everything for that choice. Her career, her reputation, her place in the community. But she never lost her integrity. Rebecca paused, gathering her thoughts. We can't bring back the children who died. We can't give the survivors back their healthy childhoods or their lost opportunities. We can't restore my aunt's nursing license or her reputation during her lifetime. But we can remember. We can tell their stories. We can ensure that corporate malfeasance like this never goes unchallenged again. She looked at the medical students in the audience. When you become doctors and nurses, remember Victoria Whitmore. Remember that your first obligation is to your patients, not to powerful institutions. Remember that sometimes the most important medicine you can provide is truth. She looked at the journalism students. When you become reporters, remember James Wu in the Riverside Chronicle. Remember that journalism exists to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Remember that some stories are worth the risk of telling, no matter how powerful the opposition. She looked at the survivors. And to all of you who carried these scars for 50 years, who were told your suffering didn't matter, who were silenced and intimidated and dismissed, I want you to know, you mattered. Your pain mattered. Your truth mattered. And now, finally, the world knows it. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a memorial wall listing all 47 children affected by the contamination, those who died and those who survived. 23 names followed by dates of death. 15 names followed by survivor. 9 names followed by recovered. Rebecca placed her hand on her aunt's name, engraved on a plaque beside the entrance, Victoria Marie Whitmore, RN, 1930 to 2025. She chose truth over silence, courage over comfort. Her light shines on. That evening, Rebecca returned alone to the mansion, her mansion now, transformed into the memorial center. She went to the library and stood before the fireplace where everything had begun, the false wall that had hidden 50 years of truth. She thought about how close she'd come to just selling the property and walking away. How easily Victoria's archive could have been destroyed by developers, discarded as worthless junk, lost forever. How many times in history truth had been buried and never excavated. But not this time. This time, the secret behind the fireplace had been discovered. The truth had emerged. Justice, delayed but not denied, had finally prevailed. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Diana, meeting tomorrow with 3 more families who signed NDAs and other Clearwater contamination incidents from the 1980s. Your aunt documented those too. Ready for round 2? Rebecca smiled. Victoria's archive had been thorough. The 1973 contamination wasn't the only secret Clearwater had buried, just the deadliest and best documented. There were other victims, other cover-ups, other truths waiting to be exposed. Ready, Rebecca texted back. Let's finish what Victoria started. She looked once more at the fireplace, at the now open passage that had hidden so much for so long, and whispered, "Thank you, Aunt Victoria. For trusting me. For believing I would have the courage you needed someone to have. I hope I've made you proud." The mansion settled around her with the creaks and groans of old wood and old memories. But the secrets were gone now, brought into the light where they belonged. The truth that had been deliberately hidden by people who believed some things were too dangerous to survive had instead survived them. And in the end, the truth had won. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our content. The truth, like the story you just heard, has the power to change lives, but only if people are brave enough to share it. Tomorrow, we have another incredible story for you about courage, justice, and ordinary people who changed the world. Don't miss it. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Victoria and Rebecca's story. And remember, some secrets are meant to be discovered. Some truths refuse to stay buried. And sometimes, the most important thing you can inherit is the courage to speak up when everyone else stays silent.